Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, my first word is a word of gratitude. I would very much like to thank the Portuguese Psychologist Association for this initiative. We do recognize how important it is for Portugal and for the Portuguese, for our society, for living, and for all those that face not only climate change problems, but daily problems, the contribution of the psychologists. You form a very young association, young but strong association, strong and strong heart association. In the sense that this meeting, this summit, is a way of recognition of your role in the Portuguese society. And nothing better than having this summit with psychologists coming from all over the world. Be welcome to Portugal. Unhappily, it's too cold for unusual November. Nobody's perfect, not even the Portuguese. But everything else, I'm sure, will give you the idea of a country, a peaceful country, quiet country, full of progress and searching for the future, receiving well those that come from abroad. But most of all, it's very important, has been very important, the contribution of the American Psychological Association. Because you were the pioneers. You still are the pioneers. And it's so important for the Portuguese psychologists to have your presence here. When I received you, I mean the Portuguese Psychologists Association, I asked them, well, what are you going really to have as initiatives for the next future to show how important you are for the Portuguese society? And someone answered me, we shall have the American Association with us. They said, well, that's a wonderful start. Well, you started on heaven. Well, the rest of your life will be much more difficult than the beginning. You chose the best patterns. And that is so important. And I said here, having Mr. Secretary of State, the Portuguese MPs, I mean those that have political influence, political power, executive power, this summit is really important. On itself, the fact of having had the idea and being able to show this idea was possible, was not just a theory, it could become reality. And you chose the right subject. You could have chosen another subject. And Mr. Secretary of State said, and he was right, and he is right, there is no healthcare without mental health care. And we Portuguese, we must admit it. We took too long to develop in the field of health, mental health care, what we really did in other areas of our healthcare system and service. We postpone sometimes, not only the diagnosis, but the therapeutic answers. It's not the case today. You chose the right subject because it's a global subject. It touches all of us, all over the world. Second, we must have a global response to it. Then there's not a single country, even a superpower, that can alone address this issue. Nobody. So the Secretary General of the United Nations is right, Mr. Guterres, when he made several appeals to the world. And this year, next year, are important years for important steps in addressing this issue multilaterally. And I must ask you to follow my reasoning. From time to time, I still find people denying reality, saying there is no climate change problem, there is no global warming problem. They are wrong. They are wrong. We know it every day. And then some of them say, of course, there is, from time to time, there are some signs of it, but we must address it unilaterally. It's a mistake, another error. It's one of the issues that must be addressed multilaterally, like peace, like trade freedom, like terrorism, like healthcare in general, like education and culture. And this requires to all of us, or from all of us, and also from the psychologists, the capacity of understanding the moment we're living, never postponing the perception of reality and the reaction, the immediate reaction to this reality, but trying to anticipate, if it's possible, to anticipate it. I always thought that one of the tasks of psychologists was to anticipate and prevent mental problems in society, both individual and collective. That's why it's so important, the connection between your action and education. Your role on education. There is also interconnection between healthcare and education. A society where education is far behind is a society where healthcare is far behind. And the opposite is true. So, prevent, as you said, Mr. Secretary of State, educate for the prevention. In any institution, in the family, in the school, in local power, in local institutions, in regional institutions, at the national level, at the international level, cooperating at the international level with those that can anticipate and that are pioneers when dealing with these kind of issues. And then, of course, direct action, you said, or a reactive attitude, which is not so important as important as preventing. Preventing, you can avoid a part of the problems. Reacting, you can try to solve or at least face those problems the moment they come. And face them in the short term, in the medium term, in the long term. That's so important in psychology. Mental health is about medium and long term. What happened in the childhood will be visible throughout one's life. 10 years later, 20 years later, 30 years later, as teaching, lecturing, I'm a professor. That's why it's easier to get votes from public works, infrastructures, than educational changes. because they are only visible 20 years later, 30 years later, 15 years later. With psychologists, just the same, when facing the problems of climate change. You gave an example, Mr. Secretary of State. We were there, both of us. You were there because it was your home place. I was there because I'm the president of all the Portuguese, so I was supposed to be there, of course. Well, where there were Portuguese suffering. That's the case of the fires. That's the case of other problems we had to face all over the world. And we saw how important was the role of the psychologists. When they arrived, things changed. The whole ambiance, social ambiance changed. Not only the life of those that had lost their beloved ones. No, the whole society. They started rethinking their past, their present, their future. It was tough. It was hard. Because we had, in 3 or 4 months' time, the loss of over 100 people in 2 different fires spread in the center of continental Portugal. Those are too many families, thousands of people touched by it. Psychologists had to deal with this. And we know that a part of those fires, a part of them, was the result of climate change. And that's why preparing the society, and reacting is as important as taking the measures that the Portuguese governments have been taken. Also to deal with climate change, reducing the emission, the gas emissions, and fixing aims, very concrete aims for those reductions. Improving renewables. We are at 54% in our global production. We'll get to 70% very, very quickly. We're doing it systematically. But that's one of the fights, perhaps the easiest one. The most difficult one is the cultural one, the civic one, the psychological one. When we speak of civic culture, we speak of the psychology of people and of societies. And these change, the civic cultural change, is much slower than the laws that we approve, the constitutions we amend, the executive orders we take. Those are easier, much easier to be taken, much easier. Much more difficult is the mentality change in people. So that's why your role is so important. Of course, on account of climate change, but it's globally very, very important. And it took too long to accept this role of the psychologists. Because other professions thought they could occupy their specific space, not only professional but vocational space. Some doctors, some lawyers, some engineers, some economists, some political scientists some sociologists, they thought, what for psychologists? What for? Just to give additional explanations, self justifications, complementary helps. They are wrong. They are wrong. From time to time, some of my former students or future students used to come to me and ask me, shall I take a degree in psychology? And they said, why not in medicine? And then study mental health care. I said, it could be. I know that some of the psychologists also studied medicine. But psychology itself is a broad area, very broad area. There is space for everybody. Those that intend to treat and to follow individual cases, family cases, social cases, labor cases, prisoner cases, civic cases, emergency cases. And so I'm very happy. And that was the main reason why I accepted to come here as a kind of support to your activity, to your association, to your role in the Portuguese society. It's a symbol. The Portuguese president comes to tell, not you, you know it by heart. It's the kind of political meetings where people say what the listeners already know and they accept easily, otherwise they wouldn't be there. No, it's not the case. Just to tell other Portuguese, other sectors of the Portuguese society and other societies, how important you are. How important you are. We don't have degrees of first class, second class, third class, fourth class, fifth class. No, we don't. Because first class degrees are those that correspond to very old universities coming from Middle Age, and the others from modern age, and others from the beginning of contemporary age. And the psychologists came a little bit later on. So, in those kind of queuing in the university ceremonies, they're always behind the others. And I feel in that situation that it's a sign of luck. I mean, being younger, it's a huge advantage. You only understand when you become older, which is my case. I'm understanding the difference between being 20 or being 71. I would rather be 20. So, climate change, of course, emergency situation, we're living in it already today. Role of the psychologists and multinational, multilateral cooperation on this subject, inevitably, but most of all, and I'm coming to my starting point, gratitude. Not just for this summit, for the fact of having a strong Portuguese association, of having it together with the American one and with psychologists coming from everywhere in the world. Together, you'll be stronger. And being stronger, you'll be very useful for all nations, for all societies, for all of us. Thank you. Thank you very much.